answering because I kinda love you. I'm just know what I want you. You're so perfect at a single thing, but you're so awful about the other things. Tell me your P90.
Do you know the saying, never meet your heroes? Well, that pretty much describes the story of me and the PS90. I read about the P90, the full auto version of this in a SWAT magazine somewhere around the early 2000s. And it was described as that super mega ultra weapon. It has the futuristic design, it was super compact, it had 50 rounds in the magazine, and it has that wonder bullet, the 5.7 at 28mm. It was described that it easily punched through body armor even at 100 meter, and when it goes in a soft target, it would turn around to create a bigger wound channel and to prevent overpenetration, and also it wouldn't ricochet. Who wouldn't love such a wonder weapon? The reality is, the P90 is built for a very specific purpose. It's so hard built for that purpose that it sucks at almost everything else. Did that stop me from buying one? Nope. The main idea of the P90 is that it's a personal defense weapon, a PDW. It was meant to be stored in the cockpit of a plane, of a helicopter, or of a tank. It has 50 rounds right integrated into the compact firearm design. It has controls that make it easy for right-handed and for left-handed shooters to run this firearm with minimal training. And in the original version of the P90, it had an optical sight integrated that didn't run on battery. So optical sight, no batteries needed, 51 units total, super compact and easy to train with. As a PDW, it's brilliant, but for everything else, it's awkward. Before we go into that, let me tell you about my config of the PS90. The PS90 is the semi-auto version of the original P90. Usually it has a 16-inch barrel with a huge barrel shroud attached to it that is replaced by a CMMG 10.4-inch barrel. That's the original barrel length of the P90. I'm currently running a thread adapter on it to mount an a-tec flash hider so I can use my a-tec suppressor on it. Why the thread adapter is necessary, that I will tell you later. The stock is quite obviously Cerakoted. This one was done by the Austrian company Verex. And I also have a second stock, because who doesn't have a second stock for his PS90, that has been also Cerakoted. This one was done by Dave Mott's Customs in the US, and he also did a fabulous job on adding this super cool stippling that is not just practical, but also fits the mecha style of this stock very good. I'm running a low mount with an MAK Mag.Red sight on my PS90, and I have replaced most of the parts that are really sucky with parts that are not sucky by FN Specialties, and this includes an enhanced bolt lever, an enhanced magazine release, a QD sling swivel at the back, aluminum trigger, and an aluminum fire selector. Oh, and don't you worry, the fire selector has the A for full automatic fire on it, but it's still just a semi-auto PS90. Let's get to the sucky part. The P90 and therefore the PS90 are built most compact possible for the cheapest price possible. Well, that's actually a good thing if you see it from the viewpoint of FN. Making the most compact firearm with the most possible firepower at the lowest possible cost so you can sell it to military customers. Well, that was the basic idea of the design. The price for this maximum compactness is ridiculous small controls, because nothing was supposed to stick out of the P90 to make it easier to store. Just look at how tiny the levers on the original bolt lever are. I replaced it with a bigger bolt handle by the company FN Specialties, and this one makes it way better. Even though the P90 is designed to be as compact as possible, this one just seems way too small. How the hell are you supposed to load your firearm with this little thing after you just crashed the plane and need to get out fast? Well, you weren't supposed. because the idea of the P90 is to be locked and loaded in the compartment. So you just pull it out, put it to fire mode, and you're ready to let your 50 rounds loose. Because if you think of it, in a stress situation, maybe even with gloves on, operating this tiny handle is just stress resistant. Let's talk about the magazine release now that is even more smaller. Just look at it. This, in case you don't see it, this one is the magazine release. This is the original magazine release I have on this stock. And you somehow have to pull this back and lift up the magazine at the same time to release it. So again, this tiny thing, pull it back, lift it up somehow, get in there, and you can remove it. How the hell are you supposed to do that in combat? Well, you aren't supposed to do that. Again, you had 50 rounds at your disposal. After that 50 rounds, well shit. You better hope that the para-rescue jumpers are already on the way to get your ass out of this mess. On my other stock, I installed the bigger magazine release from Advanced Specialties. You can see it is way bigger and therefore way more comfortable to get the magazine out and lift it up for reloading. On the original PS90s, the trigger and the file selector are made of plastic. You can see here are the original parts still installed in that stock. A problem with the plastic is that it feels very cheap. I don't want to feel cheap stuff on my fingers, and therefore I replaced them with aluminum parts from FN Specialties. They are a bit smoother in operation, so that's not the main attraction. They look better, obviously, too, but the biggest good thing about this one is that it feels better at your fingers. In the first P90 design, there wasn't a plan for attachment, so the Picatinny rates at the top pretty much came as an afterthought, but now there are even versions from FN sold with the Picatinny rates on top. Well, doesn't change the fact they are very high overbore. So your best bet is to put a technical light up there and put a pressure pad or something like that with flex-through up to the front of the stock where you can easily press it. I've gone another way and opted for an offset mount for flashlights. This one is a Surefire Scout Light Pro, whatever they call it. And the idea is that I can go up there and use it with my thumb. Let's look at other things where FN decided to cut costs. Well, this one doesn't have a bolt catch and therefore no bolt release. This firearm was fielded in the 90s and not in the 60s like some other SMGs. And it doesn't have a bolt release and a bolt catch. I mean, kind of cringeworthy, right? But you have to think again what this gun was designed for, and it helps you think of the 3 C's. Costs, combat, cockpit. If you're running out of the 50 rounds, you're probably in such a deep mess that quick reloads won't be your major issue. Another way to save cost is with the barrel. The barrel is not attached to the receiver. Well, that sounds weird, right? But really, the barrel is just held inside the upper receiver with the flash holder, or in my case, the thread adapter. So, super clever way to make the production costs go down, and it also makes it easily serviceable. But on the downside is that is the original thread of the P90, and that is the original flash header. The flash header has to have this special design to it so that it can act as a kind of counterpiece so that the barrel won't jump out of the upper receiver. So if you look at this, it goes all the way up there, and this part will actually be inside the receiver. Well, obvious downside of this is, of course, that you will always need a thread adapter that has also this specific designed to it to hold the barrel in its position because a direct mounted suppressor is not possible. The initial solution was that there was an actual suppressor that has a QD mounted system with several hooks that went up there and tuck, grabbed it up here. I talked to some people who were issued this specific suppressor and they don't like it at all. They say it's very flimsy and it's rather hard to attach it, to turn it and to keep it at the correct position. And of course you don't want a suppressor that is not in the correct position on your firearms, because else you have an additional exit hole at your suppressor. Oh, here the American suppressor company came up with a different solution. They made a flash header like this, but with an additional QD attachment point, and therefore you could attach their own QD suppressor to it. Unfortunately, I can't get parts in Austria because export laws, import laws, blah, blah, blah. So that's why I'm using the thread adapter, which gives me the option to mount a suppressor of my choice. And my suppressor of choice in this case is an a-tec A-Flow 1+2, which has a flow-through design and therefore puts less stress on the internal part of this straight blowback firearm. The magazine is probably the most complicated part of the P90, because you see that the orientation of the bullets is like this, but in the firearm, they somehow need to get in there. So they need to make a 90 degrees turn. You can see that's the final position, and in the magazine, in the pouch here, they will make the 90-degree turn to correctly feed into the firearm. Surprisingly enough, this works rather well. At least I never had a failure to feed that's magazine related with my PS90. But to make that work, FN had to apply a trick, or should I say, lacquer. Original P90 ammo that was made for fire from P90 and PS90 has casings that are coated with a tiny bit of lacquer. That makes it more slippery. You can even feel it if you touch it. This works almost like a wax coating and helps the bullet to make the 90-degree turn into the firearm. Works well enough for me, for other people as well, but if you are a reloader, you have to make sure that the shells still have a good piece of lacquer on it, because if they don't, they might get stuck in the magazine. Now I told you mostly about the negative parts, so let's do some positive things. The focus on the low-cost production makes it actually really easy to disassemble and to field strip well, except for the original top rail that is such a bitch to get off. Ask me how I know. Anyway, to field strip this firearm, get the magazine out, make sure it's unloaded, keep the hammer in a cocked position, I will tell you later now, and press this button to remove the upper receiver. If you gently shake it, the bolt and bolt carrier will come right out with it. Now you can remove the back plate by just pushing it up, and you will see the trigger box in there. To get it out, you have to lift up this little lever, push it all the way up, and push out the trigger box. And that's why you have to cock the hammer in before, because it makes you easy to get out the trigger box. Now if you're thinking, that trigger box looks awfully familiar, well, it does for me too. This is the AOG trigger box, and you can definitely see where FN got its inspiration for this trigger box. Alright? Well, fun fact, like the Steyr AOG, the FM P90, the original full auto one, has a two-stage trigger. If you put it on full auto and slightly press the trigger, it will just shoot semi-auto, and if you fully press the trigger, it will shoot full auto. That's the same with the Steyr AOG. If you need or want to, you can even take the complete stock apart. It's actually two halves that are connected by many screws. But the screws are not glued in, so you can just take a screwdriver, take them apart, flip it open, and change the trigger, change the fire selector, change the magazine release. The only thing that's a bit tricky is to get the dust cover that's here back into the correct position if you put the two stock halves back together. Ask me how I know. Now let's put this thing back together. Trigger box goes in here, lever up, make sure it's well seated, back up here, and you always have to put it back on before you put the bolt with the upper receiver back on, because that actually prevents it from slide up and down when everything is installed. We're having our upper receiver with the bolt, put it there, pressing this button, putting it back down, and it's ready to go. The P90 was designed to be wieldable by most soldiers, and this is done by a clever design. Even though it's bullpup, left and right-handed shooters can use it with it, because, as I already showed you, with the dust cover being at the bottom, the shells get ejected to the bottom instead to the left or the right side. All controls can be reached from the left and the right side, again to make it easier for left and right-hand shooters. The stock can best be described as a double thumb hold stock, I guess. The main idea is put your main hand in here, put a support hand with the thumb in here, and you can lock it up into your shoulder really tight. Of course, this also works for left-handed shooters. Take your hand up here, other hand up here, close it, and you're ready to rock. There is also an alternate position for a front hand in case you don't want to get your thumb in, and that's this one. You can hold it right here with the thumb either to the front or the thumb putting more upward to your light. The P90 stock and the PS90 stock even has an integrated hand stop that you can hold it like that. But if you're using it on full auto, it's recommended that you put your thumb through the stock, because that way you can almost like pull it down while shooting full auto to prevent it to go too much up or too much to the side from the recoil motion. No matter how ergonomically well the stock is designed, getting the magazine out is still a bitch. And that's not the only problem with reloading, because how the hell are you gonna store spare magazines with this size on your gear? There are some nylon pouches for P90 Max. Usually it's dropped like holsters because somewhere around deep down the leg. But I'm not a big fan of nylon pouches, so I challenged Driving Gear, an Austrian company, to make a P90 Kydex pouch, and he rose up to the challenge. Kydex, adjustable for tension, adjustable for angle, blade tag lot compatible, holds pretty well up, and makes reloading the P90 way more comfortable. For example, if you want to run an IPSC style competition with it. So let me just try that. I hope I can get a magazine out at the first try, or it will look kind of sucky. Now that I talked about how to better load and reload this firearm, let's talk about shooting. Is this one actually fun to run? Yes, it is. And it's almost too fun to run, especially if you consider ammo prices in Austria, because this tiny little sucker here almost costs 1 to 2 euro depending on current prices, and it's very hard to get in Austria, and it's really a shame because it's such fun to shoot. One reason because it's such fun to shoot, look at this. The bullet, the 5.7, pretty much is a shrunken 5.56. It even uses a 5.56 projectile, even though a bit lighter, because less gunpowder in it. And as most people of you know that have fired an AR-15 or another 5.56 rifle, the recoil of the 5.56 is like a snappy, mild one, so it's very easy to control. And with the mini 5.56, the 5.7 at 28mm, there is also very little recoil and more like a snappy one, even though this one is a straight blowback design and not a gas-driven design like AR-15s. So the snappy blowback enables you to do fast reshots and to make tight groups. to get this tight groups thing into perspective. A nail driver, it is not. The 10-inch barrel does make it easy to hit silhouette targets at 100 meters. So you're good to go if you need to bridge the distance. But the trigger from the regular trigger box is very military style trigger. That means it kinda creeps up and releases there. Plus, how it's shaped, it's good to shoot while moving and to move around. But if you're trying to really get into it and making precise shots at 100 meters with this firearm, yeah, that's not gonna be a group where the holes touches. Again, you can do the 100 meter, but a nice group, it will be not. Also, if you're using a suppressor, make sure that you zero it with the suppressor on. Because I showed you that the barrel is not hard mounted to the receiver, that it pretty much just hangs in between the flash hider and the rear of the receiver. So the weight of the suppressor will put the barrel significantly to the downside, and already high overbow bore is very high, and with the suppressor adding weight to it, this will go use zero boop, way to the bottom. So if you're using a silencer or a suppressor, re-zero the gun. Let's sum things up. The P90 is an expert. It's an expert in the 3 C's it was designed for, and that's costs, compact, and cockpit. So the idea was to make the cheapest SMG possible with the most firepower and the smallest package possible for pilots or crews of fighter jets, helicopters, tanks. So if they have to get out, they will have a fighting chance. But if you ain't flying a jet to your work every day, this one kind of seems like not very well fitting. Anyway, if you SBR a PS90, it could make a nice truck gun if the laws allow it in the state or in the country where you live, or a nice backpacker's gun. Because without the suppressor, it's super compact. You can just get it out of your backpack and have 50 rounds at your disposal before you have to reload. The PS90 SBR could also work as a home defense gun if you're finding a solution for a tactical light that fits for you. One of the advantages of the PS90 design is that you can easily hold it with one hand, shoulder it with one hand, have a stable shooting position, and have your other hand free for, I don't know, maybe using a handheld flashlight, a phone to call the police, or to put your loved ones out of harm's way. If you decide to use a PS90 in a dynamic shooting scenario, I don't know, like IPC, IDPA, whatever, you should consider making some improvement to it, like getting a bigger charging handle and getting a bigger magazine release. And once you start running this one dynamic, you will definitely notice why Special Forces got away from the P90 and are changing to other weapon systems. Because everything with this firearm is just somehow a workaround if you don't use it for this very specific scenario of the 3 Cs. Considering all of that, would I buy this firearm again? Well, absolutely, because I've got a thing for free guns and also SG1 bitches. But seriously, if you look at the prices, and right now the PS90 without upgrades costs about 2K, there are cheaper guns that can be used for more scenarios than a PS90. And oh, don't forget ammo prices for the 5.7 at 28mm. They are really high compared to 5.56. And now for the final question to answer. Will the P90 G36 carry handle? Well, I'd say that's probably a no. Although it might work if you have body armor on. So, anyway, that's it for today. It would be great if you guys and girls would support me by visiting scarit.redbubble.com and get a t-shirt with one of my self-made great firearm related designs on it. Only thing left to say for me is until we meet again, au revoir.